See a couple more names trickling in. We're going to be starting right on the top of the hour, so get comfortable.
We're trading our stools for comfortable chairs, Paul.
Great question, Alicia. We are not going to have people on video yet. We're going to turn on that capability at the end of the presentation. Well, by my clock, it's 6 o'clock. So I'm going to give a little welcome and we will get started. Welcome everyone to the first in our Talk Shop series, where we will feature candid conversations with our most esteemed members. Thank you as always to our title sponsors, Principal, Retail One, and MDI Worldwide. We would not be able to do what we do without your support. Before we get started, I have a couple announcements. The Institute's 50th International Design Competition is open for submissions. Design teams are invited to submit projects open between January 1st, 2020 and December 31st, 2020. And we are accepting, the deadline for entry is March 31st of this year. So I really encourage you all to submit. Quick note about membership. If anyone is still on the fence about membership, it still is free through May 31st. So check everything out on our website. And if you have questions, shoot us an email. We love to spotlight our members in our monthly newsletter. So please share any big news, store openings, blog posts, or the like with us at Atlanta Southeast at retaildesignинstitute.org. Excuse me. And finally, there will be a quick 2-question survey following this webinar. We would love to hear your feedback and better serve our members. So please take the time to answer the questions if you can. Few housekeeping details about this evening. Everyone is off camera and muted for the time being. If you have comments or questions, please use the chat feature. Near the end of the presentation, we will change the settings so you can turn on your cameras and audio to interact with the guys. And enough housekeeping, a bit about Ken and Paul before I hand it over. Ken Fuller is an award-winning project designer and former Disney Imagineer who has combined planning and design with management expertise to orchestrate the delivery of innovative environments, resulting in enhanced customer experience and entertaining spaces worldwide. Ken is also a devoted and involved member of the Institute. He has served as the International Vice President, as well as both President and Vice President of the Atlanta Southeast Chapter. Paul continues to engage with Atlanta's design community, with the Retail Design Institute, and through his studio, Pizzini Design. A former Miller Zell creative director, Paul matches his wide experience with clients, both large and small. I think it's about time we get started. So without further ado, I hand it over to the guys.
Well, thank you, Lindsay, and welcome to all those spaces that some of which I know. I'm so glad we could all get together to really go through this fascinating story that Ken has, his 9 lives of design. Ken and I have actually been working off and on and been involved in RDI for about 15 years, if you can believe that.
Almost forever.
Almost forever. We call ourselves the Designosaurs. And from that point, we really have had some very interesting and exciting times,
Yes.
along with some stressful times as well. But
A little of both.
overall, the thing that's brought us all together has been the Design Institute and has really been the glue that's kind of molded our professional careers and guided us through all of these different experiences. So I'll turn it over to Ken, and he will lead us through his 9 lives.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. And it's going to be an adventure. We want to have a good time sharing. And I first want to thank Catherine and Lindsay for this opportunity to share my story. I would encourage all of you to do the hard work, which it was a little challenging when they said, hey, we want to consider this. I had been considering doing something like documentation of my career, but had not gone very far with it. So this was a good driving force to do that. And I think all of us need some motivation. And when you have a chance, be sure to document projects, people, and the experiences that you're doing. And we look forward to seeing all of you up here on the camera, which is not my happy place usually. I prefer being the designer with working with my hands instead of on camera, but we're going to make it a fun thing. And I really appreciate this special time together, Paul. So thank you for your friendship through the journey.
That's right.
Okay.
I think that for the first way that you came about the 9 lives is an interesting story.
It is, and we'll go to the next slide. You will see that as I was considering my story and I looked down at the floor at my cat, I thought, aha, I don't know how to structure this, but I've had a lot of different experiences as things go up and down, kind of like 9 lives. So I started looking at what my 60 years from way back when to today could be packaged into 9 chapters or stories. So that story will start with Aero Space, will roll into my early retail planning, which launched me into theme parks, which jumped to clubhouses and then retail rollouts, entertainment resorts, childcare facilities, finally my own studio, and pursuing some recreation and rescue. So kind of different stories, but we're going to touch on them and try not to get bogged down.
And I think the number 9 is important, but also the number 50 is important.
It is. And I've had a journey first with my wife over the last 50 years of marriage, which has been very challenging for both of us when we moved, and she had to pack and unpack 50 times for our 25 moves. So at times she was a little frustrated with all my changes in my 9 lives. Then I've actually had the opportunity to visit all 50 states and have projects in all 50 states over these over 50 years of design. And then I realized this is the year of Walt Disney World's 50th anniversary. So that's kind of appropriate that we're talking about the Disney World experience where Epcot is located.
Yes.
So,
and I think that leads us into the story of Epcot.
it does. And as you look at these slides, you'll notice at the bottom of many of them, I have listed for your information what I consider my design proverbs, and Paul and I will mention those off and on. But about 40 years ago, I started my journey in a magic kingdom far away. And this was looking at the design of retail planning for Epcot. And I had a design team 40 years ago in California that we were preparing to move back to from California back to Florida, where construction was going on. So I had to change from my Imagineering hat, where I was working with the world's best Imagineers in California, to my hard hat, and become really a construction manager, quality assurance, and was on the site for a year in construction management. So my involvement with Epcot directly was 4 years with design, 3 years in California, construction and then follow-up. So I had the team and we were doing construction. We were getting ready for that big day, opening day, 1982, which is almost 40 years ago. So the grand opening came, thousands of people waited. We were on the inside watching as they cut the ribbon. Incredibly exciting because we were finishing what was to be known as the largest building construction project in the world at that time. So I didn't even realize that till I recently read that wow, it was over $1 billion project. We did the grand opening and reality struck. We're almost done, so what next? Before we go too much further though, I'd like to flash back about another 10 years and look at the beginnings.
Talking about where it all started. And
Yes.
I believe that was at Georgia Tech, a tech grad.
Yes, that was a key role.
And a key role in your forming your design philosophy is really started with all of that experience at Georgia Tech.
It really was the foundation for my design life. But even a few years before that, while I was still a senior in high school, my fundamental theme park began because I was brought up in a theme park community where it was built around many stone houses built around parks. It was called Grove Park. So I already had a park in my name, and it was developed by Dr. Grove. And many of you may have been to or be familiar with Grove Park Inn, a very beautiful hotel up in Asheville, North Carolina. So that was the beginning of my theme life. And it was brought forward with two wonderful next door neighbors. One was an architect who became the architect for Georgia Tech. The other was a counselor at Georgia Tech. So how good is that?
Yeah, very fortuitous.
That was amazing. So I had never heard of industrial design, but the counselor took me on a tour, gave me some tests on aptitude, and introduced me to the Georgia Tech Industrial Design Department. It was kind of a small fledgling operation under the School of Architecture. If you go back to the Industrial Design Department at Georgia Tech today, it's bigger than architecture. Yes. And it's an incredibly beautiful school with producing projects that are amazing. And it's just an amazing group of people that are coming out of the Industrial Design School. But way back then, we had 6 or 7 students, believe it or not.
Yeah.
A small, very intimate, being taught by a German professor from the Bauhaus.
Which is really where it all began and was kind of the rigor for most design courses.
It was the precedent of what
Yes.
was become known as modern design. And he was classmates and taught by Mies van der Rohe and Paul Klee and Miro and Walter Gropius, these legends of modern architecture. And so he was trying to teach us design thinking. So it was about process, form follows function, looking at what we could do with sketching, but also model making. And we got into the shop and had to learn materials and techniques. So this chair and this desk, we not only had to sketch and paint, we had to build and figure out how it actually operated with human factors.
Right.
So great education and the foundation for what was to become a long career in design.
But I think after you finish this intensive course study,
yes,
and you're ready to enter the real world, you have another factor that comes back into your life again and again, which I've known Ken for a while. So
yes,
the aerospace has always been kind of an interesting link that you have going through your entire career.
It has been a continuing thread, yeah, along with my watercolor that I started doing in industrial design. But out of college, I did accept a position in the aerospace industry. And we jump to the next slide. We see my first job was with McDonnell Douglas, and the little DC-9 on the right is what I was doing interior layout and planning for. And I worked for a boss who was working on the DC-10, and we did the rollout while I was there in the maiden flight. But I didn't get to stay in McDonnell Douglas very long because the Air Force was in my future because I was about to get drafted. Many of you may remember, if you're still of the dinosaur age, Vietnam was raging, and I didn't want to be in the foxholes, and I had a father who had been a pilot in the Air Force, so I decided I was going to join the Air Force, go through officers training, flight training, and you see on the right, my first jet I flew, and on the left, getting ready to get in a T-38, and then in the center, my certificate for flying it supersonic. You also see watercolor and drawing are continuing even in the Air Force, where my combat boot and a painting of the T-38 that I was driving around the sky in. But fortunately, Vietnam got over rather abruptly, right at the end of flight training of all things. Very fortuitous, just like some of my other events. And I had a chance to get out of the Air Force, and that opened up a new chapter.
And that chapter is similar to the timing I was involved in terms of retail.
Yes.
That was the first job that I had coming out of art school. And I think that's one of the touch bases that we have in common in terms of getting a start in what is now, design, retail design.
It was trying to find, where can I get a job, honestly?
Yes.
And fortunately, even while I was in school and college, I had done 2 summers, kind of like internships in retail design, one at Rich's and one at a fixture fabrication consulting firm. So I had a taste of retail and decided out of the Air Force to come back to Atlanta. Wasn't a lot of product design going on, which is what an industrial designer thinks they're going to do.
Yes.
But retail design had an opportunity to design shops, fixtures, decor for the interior, deal with graphics. So I thought, okay, I'm going back and get in retail design. Just like Paul said, that was where the opportunities were. And here I am sitting in my Rich's store planning desk. And
yes, for some of our newer members, that is a drawing board that Ken is sitting at.
no,
And he is actually sporting some sideburns.
and you'll notice no computer, no laptop, no cell phone. You'll see an electric eraser and a parallel ruling bar, which some of us still use.
Yes, yes, comes in handy.
It does. And my some of the bigger projects was Cumberland Mall, and I did a lot of the interior fixturing and custom lighting for Cumberland. Of course, the interior has changed 100%, but the exterior looks just about like it did 40 years ago. So things have changed, but a few things stay the same. After Cumberland opened, I designed and worked on a Rich's in Birmingham, and that led to a consulting job working with a designer group that did store planning in Birmingham. And that's why I really got a broader perspective of store design, specialty stores, and begin a little different chapter.
But once that was, you kind of worked on the retail, then you had a really nice change and opportunity.
I did.
And some great things that kind of came together at one part to really launch your entry into the theme park design.
And I want to interject here that in order to get there, you have to know a road to get there. And the network from college was that path. So I want to remind all of you, keep your network fresh. It's real easy to cocoon and lose track as you're working on your computer, and as we're all locked into our home offices. But the network of our friends, our classmates, the people we work with that we think, well, I'll never see them again. You will see them again.
You will see them again.
And it pays to stay in touch in a positive way, because through that, I got a call from my friend that I went to Georgia Tech with, and he was now working for Disney. And he suggested that I come down to Florida and consider going to work for Epcot in design. And he had been hired into marketing art, and he knew some people he could introduce me to. I worked hard on my portfolio and decided, okay, I'm going to make another change and dive into theme park retail with the idea that I'm going to be the king of retail design for Epcot. But I soon realized Epcot was still very much in high concept design in California. And I was working in Florida, where we dealt with more the operational realities of the parks. And that was great, because here I learned how to do theme design in existing facilities. And that was putting a Pooh shop into our shopping village. Here on the bottom right, putting a character shop into Disneyland, or the top left, doing an Aristocat shop for Fantasyland and Walt Disney World. And also cutting my teeth on some experience design and being Tigger and learning the trick of being a bouncy character.
That's right. Exactly what most Imagineers have to really engage in. So it's part of the training of the Disney organization for Imagineers and creative folks to actually partake fully in the experience.
Dive in, and I'll have to say it was a very intense, short time as Tigger, but you come out really thrilled because of the interaction with kids that are all around you.
That's
and
the experience.
trying to sign autographs, Tigger, and make pictures.
And what I like about some of these sketches that Ken did early on is there's so much, it's almost a lost art now, because you really see the attention to detail comes at that moment of drawing it out or sketching it out. And I think these are, it's refreshing to see some of these techniques being used today, of course, but back in those days, that was what you did.
We had to be able to draw to communicate. And that often meant some long nights. And we developed a little saying you may see at the bottom here: no pain, no gain. And my boss and I would laugh about that and would say, well, we must be gaining on it, because I'm feeling some pain. I'm feeling the burn. So,
but I think what this did was it led you to work with and meet some of the legends in animation and in storytelling.
Yes,
to the Disney Corporation.
And then that really was facilitated. These bosses of mine from California would come and review everything we did. But then my direct boss in Florida was asked to go to California to start putting together the retail World Showcase team. He was director of World Showcase and over the development for retail. And after he was out there for a while, he and several of us were tapped in Florida to come to California to be the key design management for developing food facilities, show facilities, and retail design. So I was challenged to be the manager of retail design for Epcot Center. We didn't know how many shops we were going to have, but we ended up with 60. And my bosses, which are shown here, were amazing legends of Disney. And it was a little intimidating, actually, Paul,
I can imagine,
to work with people that personally spent their lives very close in the shadows of Walt. My head of architectural design was John Hinch. He's on the far right side. He was also known as the artist for Mickey Mouse, and there's one of his paintings for Mickey. He started his career in things like Fantasia in the very early days of Disney. He worked on things like Dumbo and Cinderella and animation and special effects. So these people came out of animation in the studio. And my other boss that I reported to was Marty Scalara, and he was the side of story. And he was the total emphasis of start with a story. Design has to have a story. If you can't write it down you can't draw it. So all of our shows, all of our experiences start with, what is the narrative? Tell me the story.
I know with some of the projects that we've worked on together, they
Yes.
always start with a story. And I thought
Right.
I'd never really thought of it as a story, but more as a journey. But actually, the story becomes a lot more invigorating, really, and engaging.
It was the key thread, and Marty Sklar in his book here was the keeper of that key, and his book Dream It, Do It was a key part of what we did. So you had to be able to dream it, but you had to be able to do it. It's not enough just to talk about it. You have to be able to go and do it.
To actually
And actually, Ray Bradbury came and worked with us on Future World, and he gave us a speech one time, and he told us it's in the doing. It's not in the talking, it's in
Yes.
life, and results happen in the doing. So get out, get on the board, get on the computer, do it, make it happen.
Have a charrette.
And remember, design, I taught and was learned from John Hinch, was it starts with a long view, but you got to work on the close-ups.
And that's so true. I think the next slide really shows there's a great story behind this, because this is how it all really started, from Walt giving somebody a direct order.
It really did. And these are incredible legends, the finest designers and artists I've ever worked with. And really the creator indirectly on the left is Herbie Ryman. Herbie was a friend, an artist, a art director. He came out of the studio. He kept his own art studio, but worked with Walt on a lot of things. And actually, the beginning of Disneyland, when Walt knew he wanted to do this park, he didn't have any drawings, even though he had the beginning of the Imagineers were already starting to take shape. He went to Herbie Ryman and said, Herbie, I need you to help draw Disneyland. And I got this idea, and he talked about it, told Herbie the story. And Herbie said, well, I'd love to see it, Walt. He said, well, Herbie, you've got to draw it this weekend, because Roy, my brother, has to take this to New York next week. And we don't have anything to show. And the Bank of America is the key to building Disneyland and making this dream into reality. So would you work with me this weekend and create a storyboard for Disneyland? Herbie really said no. He said, well, I really don't want to do that. He said, well, I'll feed you, I'll stay with you, we can do this. So Herbie said, okay. So they worked and produced the drawing you see on the left. That's the original drawing of Disneyland, drawn by Herbie Ryman, with the plan on the right, and some of the attractions, the train going around it. That became the essence and the foundation of theme parks worldwide. A weekend charrette that Walt and Herbie Ryman did. And I had the privilege of sitting and talking with Herbie, and he would come around and help us draw, and he would paint this beautiful renderings like on the right of Epcot or at other attractions. He actually painted the original castle for Disneyland. Just the stories go on. But another story, and an equally great guy, was Ken Anderson, and he was really the architect for Disneyland and worked closely with Walt. And he was also an animator, came out of the studio, creating such great things like Robin Hood characters, personally created Pete's Dragon, Shere Khan from Jungle Book. And he came out of retirement to work with us on the Africa Pavilion. Well, unfortunately, we never did the Africa Pavilion, but it was a great time to meet with him, sit and talk with him, and hear personal stories that Walt actually shared his dream with these legends. So we, the youngsters, could figure out how to do this.
Yeah, and I think the amazing thing is that once you partook in all of that exciting I think, kind of intimidating, because here's a guy that came up with the entire idea in a weekend.
Yes.
You know, what Ken was able to do, and I think in the next slide, you'll see that some of his work has really reflects some of the care and I think the delicacy of dealing with a themed environment by creating it, drawing it, and kind of imagining what it
It,
is.
it really was my first dive into creating Epcot. We started on World Showcase. Most of the retail shops, which ended up being 50, but 50, actually 60, 55 of them were in the World Showcase. 5 were in the front part called Future World. And the first area I worked on was the United Kingdom. And this was a concept for a Selfridge department store. And I really didn't have a clue about Selfridges and didn't have really an idea. I was, as Paul said, rather intimidated by these incredible studios, art directors and artists, great designers out of Art Center. The best designers in the world were in our hallowed halls that came out of retirement to do this. So I would be kind of struggling, and Herbie would come by and he'd say, well, try this. And the figures in this drawing were a result of Herbie teaching me how to create whimsical figures for a themed environment. Then I went on and did this other sketch for a men's accessory shop. And some of the results are the Germany, actually that was that's a ceramic shop, porcelain shop, and then later the Morocco Fez, the shopping street. So we got into the flow, and these were the results from working with these incredible legends of design. And also, just real quick, you'll see in the top right corner, my first dive into the Institute of Store Planners, which was 1987. I don't remember the year RDI was transitioned, but it's probably about 10 years later.
Yes, yes.
And that's when I started. And then I was involved actually when we changed to the RDI, new logos and new name.
And I think it became a much broader organization. Institute of Store Planning was a little bit
Too narrow.
too concise.
It was.
And didn't encompass really all the skills and all the talents that we use when we do design.
It brought us into a broader perspective and opportunities, which we all need now to reach into areas that are not pure traditional retail.
But one of the things that I like is on the next slide, you see the experience that Ken was having all the while he was creating experiences. He was doing some pretty amazing things.
We had to do research because good design doesn't just happen. You have to make it happen by going out there and studying the detail. And the detail was out in the countries where we were doing retail design to represent. And they had to be authentic operational food and retail facilities. They weren't to be a contemporary version, which was one of the big problems when we tried to do the research. So they said, well, we've got to go to places and certainly start with Euroshop and see the newest in retail. But to find what we were looking for, we quickly realized it wasn't in the shops of Europe or China or Japan as it was in the hotels, the restaurants, the bars were a good place to find it.
Always are.
Yeah, some of the historic buildings and museums, but was very disappointed for the most part that the retail design was not very helpful as far as facilitating the design process for Epcot. But it was a great experience because we traveled first class and flying back and forth to China and Japan, doing research and working with incredible merchandising people that were participants in these countries and would show us around their products and their operations. And then one day I was in Paris and my executive assistant said, well, I've got you a flight out of Paris to New York. You want to fly the Concorde? I said, sure. She said, it doesn't cost much more than first class, so I'll book you on the Concorde. So here you see the Air France SST I flew, and we went Mach 2 across the ocean at 60,000 feet. And I don't know, we got into New York in about 3.5 hours, I
So,
think.
so there's another aerospace tie-in through your career.
It was a fun ride. And then later I did some more research and went to Spain and worked with the Minister of Tourism of Spain. And we were talking about actually putting the European Disney in Spain. That didn't work out, but here you see the long sidebirds again while I was visiting some people that were heavily involved at Disney in Toledo, Spain, a beautiful city.
And then I understand that you actually had a golden Mickey
That's
card
true.
that got you into special privileges, which that, to me, that would have been, you know, it's better than Diners Club, that's for sure.
The Diners Club is okay, but you got to pay that bill. The Golden Mickey opens doors and you couldn't go without. And yes, it opened doors in Germany and in France, places where communications was very challenging and language wasn't working, but you show somebody a card with a Golden Mickey on it, they get the message pretty quick. It cuts through the noise.
Yes.
So that was our secret weapon. Thanks for reminding me.
So the next step was really the overarching concept for all of this that you were working on.
It was, and we had to have consistent quality throughout. And here I wanted to share with you the rendering of Epcot on opening day. So you get a sense of this 300-acre park, which is twice as big as Disneyland. And we had shops in all of the future world out front, including Spaceship Earth. And just a quick aside, in Spaceship Earth, we had a huge camera shop. And one of the real challenges was, how do you sell film really fast? Because we had film and cameras. And the first thing the tourists or the guests wanted to buy, oh, I need some film. So we had to come up with a real fast way to reload a fixture to get film into the guest hands quickly while they were under Spaceship Earth, about to go out into Future World, and then on down into World Showcase. And I wanted to share with you also this image of Epcot with Spaceship Earth that Herbie Ryman did, where he captured Walt's spirit in the rendering. And you see Walt there. And today there's a major reimagining of Epcot with the anniversary coming up and trying to put new shows, new attractions. So if you have a chance to go down, you'll see an enhanced Spaceship Earth. You'll see some new rides, especially back in the World Showcase area.
Yeah, and I think what they're trying to do now is make it more family friendly.
Yes, we are. They are
involving the kids, and certainly their huge franchise in animation still continues to this day.
Right. So which they were trying, and we were trying to a little bit, but it didn't happen, to put more shows and attractions. They actually, not a couple of years ago, put in the attraction of Frozen in Norway. They're putting Ratatouille in France. They're putting a new attraction, what used to be the Energy Pavilion. So there's going to be more family, kid-friendly attractions in Epcot when you go down and take your family and enjoy the show.
And I think, and the next slide really shows what I think some of the practical things that you not only worked on these exciting environments, but there were also things that you learned from how the customer flows through the space, and all of those good things you picked up and put it into practical use in planning and designing the space.
We had to think in terms of certainly volume, theme, and even in one case, contemporary design in Future World, which you see in the top illustration, where that was the Centurium, a contemporary space. But unfortunately, it's one of the few retail spaces we did that was totally demolished and a new store was put in literally quite a few years ago, because as soon as we would do a modern contemporary space, it becomes dated. And that was a real problem with contemporary design. Whereas theme design, and it's a good thing to remember as a designer, if you have theme elements mixed in, those are timeless. And for instance, here at Mitsukoshi, we had some modern elements of Japanese architecture. We worked closely with Mitsukoshi, one of the oldest department stores in the world, out of Osaka, and their store was beautifully combined with contemporary and traditional, and later we remodeled it again, and this is the remodeled version. And we also did some additional pavilions in Epcot for the Norway, and you see there the Norway pavilion retail that I was working on. And this brings in that not only was I an Imagineer, but after we finished the key parts of Epcot, later I went into our work with architectural firms as a consultant back to Disney. So there's a lot of opportunities as designers to work with Disney as an architectural or design consultant to develop the Imagineers concepts.
And I think the next slide really kind of indicates where this fourth life is going. And in Clubhouse, you really entered into a whole nother way. You used some of the skills and some of the wonderful experiences you had at Disney, but you're able to translate them into a whole different type of retail experience.
It was both retail and hospitality now were being dialed up. And I really hadn't done much hospitality. I was certainly aware of it because we had shops in the hotels, in the resorts. But now with a Clubhouse, I had a new opportunity, and actually something that is the reality in working with Disney and studios. Everything is driven by a budget. Even at Disney, we had a essentially unlimited budget on Epcot, but when it was done, the cutbacks start and layoffs began, and we started losing and having to lay off people. And that happened. I laid off a lot of my good designers. And then the next thing I know, my whole department is dissolved and I'm out looking for the next chapter in my challenge of life. So that was the Clubhouse experience. A designer that I networked with from Auburn, who was an industrial designer, offered me an opportunity to get involved with interior design, image design in Atlanta. And our first project was Clubhouses. So let's look at those. And I couldn't imagine what we'd be starting with. I knew they were doing a lot of golf resorts, but he said, no, we're going to Louisville. We got a little project up there we've been challenged to look at. Well, it turned out to be a cosmetic renovation of Churchill Downs Clubhouse. And it was a tired facility that needed a lot of help.
A lot of heritage, but not really there in terms of image.
No, and they were having trouble really keeping it as a active business because it had really very few paying races except for the Kentucky Derby.
Right.
I mean, it had other races, but they weren't significant. So they wanted to really make it a more entertaining, fresh themed environment, but with no budget. And you know what it takes to do a lot without a lot of money.
So you got very creative.
We got creative, and it was about paint, graphics, fabrics, signage, and keeping it simple, doing more with less. And the results are shown here, and it worked to re-image Churchill Downs and dive into Clubhouses.
But you didn't stop there. You went on to the next opportunity.
We did.
Which kind of involved you with some very interesting people.
Some more legends for sure. And this was something image design was excellent at and did some incredibly good golf resort and golf clubhouses. And my first project right out of the bat was working on Isleworth Country Club in the bottom right. And this was the premier club for Arnold Palmer. And we were doing all the interiors, including the retail shop. And I had the privilege of working directly with Arnie and his wife to develop his office on a mezzanine above the pro shop. And this Isleworth is a premier club area. And as an aside, this was also the development where Tiger Woods and Shaquille O'Neal had beautiful homes back when we were doing this. At Image Design, we also work with another master, Jack Nicholas, and this Clubhouse for New Orleans was one I worked with. And a sketch that I did a lot of interior rendered sketches like this as we developed these somewhat themed, but also somewhat contemporary operational clubhouses.
Very elegant environments. I think what is amazing is Ken was able to take these experiences, and with the next life that he had, his fifth life was in retail rollout. And that's probably a life that I can identify with. But certainly a lot of us can. And I think I'm always amazed at how well you made the transition from designing very well-crafted interiors for these legends, and then putting on a different hat and developing other skills.
It probably was easy because my boss asked me to come back to California and help develop the Disney store. This was a totally new concept for Disney. They'd never done retail in malls or in department stores. We were talking about it while we were doing Epcot and working on Disneyland shops, but it never happened. And so I was communicating with my boss, and they were actually doing something I suggested they do many years before, and that was to create a Disney store. We didn't know what we were going to call it at the time, but it was going to be a retail concept. And they had opened 2 prototype stores. I came on board and had the incredible office in the studio. We were right on the main area across the street from the animation office, and my second floor office looked right into Walt Disney's second floor office across the street in the old animation building. And we got to walk around the back lots and see the sound stages and have lunch with the actors. They'd still be in costume sometime. We'd see them in the commissary. So to be working on the studio when we were starting the Disney store was a pretty amazing thing, with a very small group of highly talented people, and beginning to create all the fixturing, the carpet, the lighting, the signage, all that I was responsible for as the design manager for the original Disney stores. In the first year, we did 10 or 12, and then we did about 50. By the third year, we were up to 100. In the fourth year, we'd gone international. People would line up outside of the door and go around the block waiting to come in when we opened in London. It was a festival of fun. There was a lot of traditions and singing the Mickey Mouse song when they closed the store, and keeping costume and the Disney quality in a mall environment. So it was a great way to learn about Rollout with theme without getting totally beat up with tight budgets that were later to come, that you and I know.
I think the next slide really shows an interesting story, interesting side of that experience.
It was, and this was one that it was not so successful. You think everything the Magic Mouse touches will be a home run. Well, Michael Eisner wanted us, with the success of the first, 15 or 20 Mickey Disney stores, to look at fast food. We really weren't into that, but that was something he thought would be a success, just like retail. So we did Mickey's Kitchen, one in the LA area and one in the Chicago area. And they were beautiful, essentially healthy fast food themed dining experiences. Right next to you, as you see on the left, you would go up steps into the area where you'd order at the counter like fast food, but you'd be looking out over the Disney store. You'd see the video and the music and the sets of the Disney store while you were immersed in a themed fast food. We loved it. The people loved it, but the finance people said, not so fast. This is not going to work. We can't compete with McDonald's or Pizza Hut or any of the other really fast food chains that operate within the commercial mall environment. So pretty quickly, Michael said, pull the plug, shut them down, close them off. And that was a short run on a food adventure.
But fortunately, you went on to get involved in something that was pretty successful.
It was. And after I had finished the design and really the design development turned into cookie cutter, I was ready to make another change. And that's when American Greetings and Carlton Cards came on the horizon. And a headhunter contacted me and said, okay, we have hundreds of stores that are really tired and we want to have a new concept and we need a little Disney magic in the card and gift shops. So I went to one of Paul's friendly cities, from warm Southern California to the cold Northland of Cleveland, Ohio. I don't know how you stood that, Paul.
I kept moving after I got out of art school. I discovered there was the sun shone 2 days in a row in some places. So,
Well,
but yes, that whole organization there is really a tight organization. And I think with the rollout of those Carlton card shops, they were really giving Hallmark a run for their money, so to speak.
well, we were trying to do that. It was a good company, a family-owned and operated company. And I learned a lot about the art of cards and how to sell cards. Actually, American Greeting manufactured their own card fixtures. So we had to work closely with the in-house manufacturing. They manufactured a lot of their products, their cards and their gift papers and their bags. So you learned a lot about the displaying and the fixturing and the custom presentations, while at the same time, they weren't into gifts very much at that time. So we put forth the prominence of gift in the front of the store, because people often came to the store for the card. We want them to leave with the card and the gift and make it more profitable. And we also had a challenge on the left of doing a huge kiosk, which was really fun. And then we realized we had to secure it. So we had to figure out how to have pull down obscure canopies that would somewhat make a secure, huge kiosk, a card shop in the middle of a mall. Worked out pretty well, though.
Yeah, and I think that's some of that experience translated into the next group of stores and environments that I think actually we touched base on early on.
We did. We learned very quickly that rolling out is about time and money. And the first big project I got here with ACS coming into Atlanta, working again, a chapter opening to do rollouts and working with Home Depot. And it so happened, Paul and I were both working on Home Depot at the same time. He at Millersville, myself at ACS, and we were challenged on how to do this incredibly large reset. It was the largest reset ever done. It was over $1 billion and over 1,000 stores, as I recall.
And short of maybe Walmart and Target, there's no bigger rollout than Home Depot.
And we touched, like I said, a lot of stores. We had to do it fast, efficiently. We learned how to really get out of the design hat and put on the project management hat pretty much in these worlds, and working with designers at places like Gap, Victoria's Secret, Banana Republic, which had their own design standards. We had to learn how to roll those out, do the site adapts, and then later at ACS, how to really manage construction and installation for hundreds and actually thousands of these big box and small specialty stores. So a whole big experience there. And let me just quickly throw in also with RDI, I had the opportunity to go and work with Minneapolis and create a chapter up in Minneapolis. You remember that, Paul?
Yes.
And actually we had this meeting, this picture is with some people from Target that became friends and became the founding fathers, so to speak, of the Minneapolis-St. Paul RDI chapter. And we was their supporting group here in Atlanta.
Yep. And we actually toured the Atlantic Station
Yes, we
Target
did.
when it opened
And that led
a
to
number
that.
of years ago.
That
Yes.
was quite a few years ago when the Atlantic Station
Yes.
Target opened. So that was a fun ride of retail rollout, whole different chapter.
Fortunately, I think you were able to really kind of come back to your favorite comfort zone in terms of design and experience. You're able to go step out of the world of retail rollout and then back again into entertainments and resorts.
I did, and that was through the invitation of, again, the network and the intermixing of how do I create a entertainment resorts division for a large architectural firm. We had offices of this firm, HLM, which was, I was going to join in Orlando, had offices all over the world and every major city in the US. But in Orlando, we were very much into trying to create an entertainment resort studio, while the rest of my architectural engineering colleagues were building such things as great hospitals and institutions called correctional facilities, which was a nice word for jails. So a secure,
But it paid the bills.
but a secure resort is a jail, actually. I learned that. And the engineers that I would use for hotels and resorts were often people who were good at doing correctional facilities. But it was a good group to work with. And that was starting in Orlando, and we can dive into that. And one of the projects we did there was for the Ron John people, who at that time was being managed by a ex-Disney merchant. And the network brought us an opportunity to create some conceptual design with my architects at HLM. And here I did a sketch, and my architects and I worked together on concepts to do Ron Johns in malls and in commercial facilities, and not just be a beach shop. And several of those were done later.
Yeah, I think that I love this story. This is another one of those experiences that happens that's very fortuitous and very inventive at the same time. This concept was really created around a concrete box as a shopping environment.
That's right. And that concrete box is a lot like a studio, which is just a big empty box. So that's sort of how the studio design and art directors come out of that environment. And then we at Imagineering had to think in terms of how do you take and put a theme, like in this case, Star Wars and Tatooine Traders retail at the exit of the Star Wars show. And how do you put all this facade out there and make the building waterproof, secure, and operational with fantasy on the outside, the facade? Well, I didn't know, but fortunately I worked with some really good fabricators and architects in my office and other consultants, because we were working with Imagineers who didn't really know how to do it either. They said, here it is, you guys figure it out. That's what they hired us to do. So we came up with, I guess it had been done before, just a concrete box, as Paul said. And all this facade is supported with steel outriggers, bracing and support. And it sort of floats on that concrete box. And you can actually go behind it and do special lighting and work on areas that may have concerns, because it essentially floats out and is loosely connected to the box where the interior retail space is, which was kind of like a propped out set of a studio.
But what a dramatic way to go about building a selling environment. It's like a movie set.
It was a movie set. That's
Yes.
exactly right. And that's
Yes.
what a lot of the original Disneyland and Disney stores were about, is creating movie sets.
I think that this led to another really creative concept that Ken was involved with in terms of aerospace, coming back again with the aerospace link, a graphic program for Cape Canaveral, and also at Huntsville, some very interesting approaches to hospitality.
It was a great ride. We won't spend too much time on it because I see now we are rapidly approaching an hour and this is getting a little drawn out. But hey, when you want to tie in rockets, you can't not do that. So we had the opportunity to work for the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. And these beautiful renderings were done through my architectural department. And we came up with the idea of taking the Saturn V and putting it in a hotel as an icon. Unfortunately, the money and their plans didn't quite justify it, but we had fun. But we did execute a master plan and some graphics and wayfinding for Kennedy Space Center Visitor Center, and had an opportunity to see some incredible launch facilities of the Mercury and Gemini program. So that Aero Space now 30-ish years or 25 years later came back in again. But we learned to plan the work and work the plan in these rocket and space environments.
Yep. That led to, I think, some interesting things in Orlando.
It did. And I got to work with a themed hotel group, the Kessler Group, who specializes in themed hotels. They operate 2 in Orlando and 1 in St. Augustine. They operate a themed hotel up at Biltmore House, and I think there's 1 in Savannah. And they asked us to help them develop the Grand Floridian. No, not, well, I've worked in the Grand Floridian, but this is the Grand Bohemian in Orlando. I did the first sketch, not really knowing what a Bohemian architecture would look like. And then working with my architects, we did the next sketch on the right. And then we had to learn to make it simple and leave out some things. And the actual hotel was built as the Grand Bohemian today. You see it on the left. And it's a nicely themed hotel. If you ever have a chance to go to his hotels, he's a very big collector of fine art, and he decorates the lobby and his dining rooms with original art that he collects. Richard Kessler, a icon from Georgia Tech.
And the next project is one that I'm probably the most jealous of because of its location.
Wow, you're right. When we got this call to, would you consider doing a cricket club in Antigua? I had no idea where Antigua was. I knew it was in the Caribbean, but didn't know a thing about cricket. But we were asked to do a themed environment to showcase the game of cricket, which is a big game in the Caribbean, I learned, and they have some great stars. And they actually, we did a sculpture of, you can barely see it in the foreground, of one of their famous cricket players. And I worked with my, again, a Georgia Tech architect who was an incredible artist. He did a lot of these drawings for me and with me. But I did the first sketch in the top right. We worked together and he contemporized it a little bit, made it more architectural for fitting around a round cricket field. So we came up with a curved building, and the Antigua sticky wicket was born, and you see the results here.
And one of the things I think is, as we move into the next slide, specialty childcare. I think this touches upon a part of Ken that I, after working with him for 15 years, have kind of realized that he has more than just the designer hat on, but he has a vision of humanity, if you will, of caring for others, donating your time and your talents to a cause that's kind of beyond what just normally what we would consider retail design or a design field.
Yes. Going beyond the normal clients at HLM, we were large enough that we had the opportunity to do some pro bono work. And we did participate in a very special program. And I really had never done this kind of thing before, and was fortunate to have a company big enough that were willing to do this. But we had the opportunity to work with an incredible gentleman who was a survivor of Holocaust. He spent his childhood years in the German Holocaust prison and had the tattoo on his arm to show for it. And he had a heart for children because of this and wanting to help other children. And he came to the US, he became involved in hotels, and he owned a hotel on the Space Coast and got to know the original astronauts, the Mercury and Gemini astronauts, who became friends, and he shared his idea of creating a village to help kids who are terminally ill. Most of them have some kinds of cancer. They go to make a wish for their sort of terminal wish. And this is a way to facilitate that in a village called Give Kids the World in Kissimmee. It's a themed village, and I had the opportunity to work on the design development and help create the Welcome Center, which is called House of Hearts, because everything about this was sharing your heart and designed from the heart. And I had the privilege of working with Robert A.M. Stern on this. He came down from New York and helped develop this architecture, and it turned into a beautiful welcome center for this village. And then we did the dining room, which is more of an Alice in Wonderland theme. And working with Henry and his wife and family was a once in a lifetime opportunity that I'll never forget.
And that kind of ties into this very interesting project that followed, was really has a great story of how it came about.
It really does. And we kind of got this from our experience in hospital design, and the architects, again, my head of architecture was doing a lot of hospitals, and our Chicago office was doing a lot of hospitals with Rush and the University of Chicago. We got a call to come to Cole, Chicago, and see if we couldn't theme a pediatrics unit, which really had never been done to my knowledge, for the University of Chicago. So Doug and I went up, we got there, had no idea how we were going to do this. Nobody had done a concept for a themed pediatrics facility and didn't know where to start. So when you don't know where to start, you go out to where the story is. And the story was the children in the streets of Chicago, where we're going to find what we might create as this themed environment. And what was the story of the children? We went up and down Michigan Avenue into a lot of shops and ended up spending some time at a bookstore. And there we bought several books about Chicago. And one of them that I happened to pick up was a coloring book. Well, that became the essence of our story, along with the street scenes we had seen in Chicago. So we cartooned the Chicago experience into the interior of this hospital. And in order to tell the story and communicate it to the hospital staff, we rolled out the story with a scroll, which was literally a horizontal storyboard. It was 18 feet long. You see some of the chapters of the story here, where we were looking at the patients, the environment, the styling, the kids, the concepts. And Doug and I would do all these sketches and sketched up the floor plan of how this would all conceptually work. This was a weekend charrette, kind of like Herbie did, for the whole theming of a new concept of pediatric and the story. Well, it worked. It turned out beautiful. And even to this day, when I was researching this, I found this logo of the Pediatrics Handbook for the University of Chicago Medicine. And lo and behold, they still have the coloring book story right there in their logo. I was amazed. Some 20 years later, and it survives.
Now that's a legacy. I think the next slide really shows that sort of thinking come to life three-dimensionally in an environment, and how the kids react to all that stuff's really has to be heartening.
It was all about the heart and the kids and design with the imagination of a child. And this was done for Central Florida. The one for Chicago came out so well. We were doing some hospitals all around Florida. So in Central Florida, they wanted to remodel their pediatrics. So Doug and I went about this adventure again and created storyboards for a themed environment of what would a Florida pediatrics unit look like. And of course, you got to have an alligator, and you got to have oranges, and you've got to have the railroad was a part of this. And the theme, this photograph on the left was actually the lobby when you got off the elevator in the pediatrics unit. Now, what a great welcoming to have this fun gator being there. And then you go into the information sign in, and this is your trolley that you can sit in while mom is filling out the paperwork. And then you go to a room that's themed. Everyone had a different theme. Up and down the hallways and the areas of common space were themed for the kids to really promote wellness. And it was just wonderful to see the results.
So with all of that experience, kind of led you to the eighth life, which is your own
My own story.
studio.
Well, all good things have to change, and the change at HLM and ACS came to an end largely because of the recession, and all of our rollout clients and many of our specialty clients just stopped work. And I then started my own studio, and I knew I wanted to continue drawing and painting, which was going to be the essence of Fuller Studios. But I also was being asked to create residential design and a few special projects that would come together from RDI that Paul and I would do together. So I created my own studio, and that's something that all of you need to always look at, is how can I package my best parts into my own business and start learning how to put together proposals and marketing packages and budgets and invoicing and dealing with new and old clients at the same time and keeping them all happy, as you have to wear all the hats at the same time. So about 10 years ago, I started my studio, and I guess Paul started his shortly thereafter. And these are some of the homes I've designed in one of my sketches for residential design.
And all the while, you were engaged in continuing your sketching, your watercolor work,
Watercolor.
creating paintings.
Yes. And really one of the most, I guess, successful was the one at the bottom left, an entertainment kind of resort facility, a mini entertainment facility concept. And watercolor was the way to communicate it. The CAD drawings, the computer drawings were just not getting anybody excited. But when I got out the paint brushes and did the watercolor, it came to life, and a lot of people got interested, while still enjoying doing special paintings, abstract and portraits, and even an occasional coat of arms for a family that wanted to document their heraldic plaques and coat of arms.
And that takes us to recreation in the ninth life.
Final story, we're finally
recreation and
there.
rescue. This is a part that I think is something that Ken has a unique talent for, and also really ties in with what he's actively engaged in his life philosophy, and all the time, keeping fit,
keeping fresh. And here again, my 9 lives shows up with my watercolor of the cat in the box, which just happened. When you don't know what you're going to paint, you throw some paint and see what happens. And this is one of my 9 lives emerged as a cat in a box. But to keep the design fresh, and when I'm feeling totally lost, I get on the bike or I go for a walk, and I really enjoy staying active. And I think we sometimes forget We eat and sleep and work. But I've learned one of my key stories that I will tell you is you have to keep using the body. Just don't be afraid to go out and try something. When the Lambo was in the shop, get on the bike and go for a ride. I did that today in order to clear my head for this presentation. Did a 14-mile ride on my bike, and I love to go out to the AT or hiking in the North Woods, and occasionally get in the kayak and run a rapid river. So we try to have fun. Design is better when you're having fun, and occasionally, as on the left, have fun with Mickey.
And I think the other tie-in is from the heart again. Ken's involvement in charity, and I think some of those very valuable life lessons that you learn along the way and you can share.
Well, it's a totally out there, unexpected opportunity where I could apply some of my skills and learn a whole new group of outreach. And that was how to help people that were really enslaved in sex trafficking. And a friend of a friend came to a small group of us, and my wife and I were participating and asked to pray about and think about how we can rescue girls out of sex trafficking in the city of Atlanta. One of the biggest sex traffic areas in the country at the time, was maybe the biggest. And with our athletic teams, with our conferences, conventions, and huge marketing and sales that goes on in Atlanta, the opportunity for sex trafficking is huge. And there were a lot of girls on the streets with no place to turn. So we said, okay, we're going to try to rescue girls out of the darkness and give them some light and hope in their life. So you see the hope my wife and I are holding, and the watercolors that reflect this going from out of darkness into light and a new life. And we created Out of Darkness, later became part of the Atlanta Dream Center. Just recently, we created a rebranding, and it's now Frontline Response. We started small. We rescued a few girls the first year. This was 10 years ago, by the way. Same time I was starting Disney Studio, or Fuller Studio. I wish it was Disney Studio, but Fuller Studio and Out of Darkness started at the same time. We rescued about 30 girls the first year, then about 100 the next year, a couple of hundred the next year. We've been blessed to be able to continue that. In the last 10 years, we've rescued over 1,500 girls off the street into safe houses. I helped participate in the renovation of a safe house where the girls were taken before they go to long-term recovery. Along the way, we got involved in helping the homeless, where we also rescue men and women out of homelessness, and helping children to prevent them from getting taken into the sex and drug trade. So designed to serve and share the good news was a huge opportunity. And I think that the heart for working with kids and rescue has been the greatest reward of my 9 lives.
And you know, who knows? It may go on to the 10th life. Who knows what might happen?
I'm only beginning in many ways. The stories continue, and we conclude and dedicate this presentation kind of full circle in memory of one of my best friends from Georgia Tech, Stan Starr, who just passed away this month after 25 years as a Disney marketing artist. As I mentioned earlier, he's the one that gave me the call and suggested that I get into theme design, go to work for Disney, and create Epcot Center retail, and later thousands of themed retail environments. So dedicate this to Stan Starr. And he created this painting for Disney for one of the art shows that Disney put on every year. And he had to get permission from the Dolly Foundation to do it and publish it for Disney. And we have Melting Mickey here as a remembrance of my great friend and industrial designer, Stan Starr. So we'll keep on believing and keep designing.
That's right. And thank you all for those of you who are still with us for participating in the 9 lives of Ken Fuller.
Apologize if we ran a little long and it got a little involved, but it's a lot to share.
That was fantastic, guys. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome.
We've put everyone on as panelists now. So if you'd like to turn on your video or audio and ask questions to Ken, please do. I encourage you to do so. It was such an inspirational hour.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
I actually have a question for you, Ken.
Okay.
Over your storied career, do you think that customers have changed, or do you think things are the same?
I think serving our guest and keeping the customer, thinking of them as a guest more than a customer was one of the first things I learned at Disney. We don't call them customers, we call them guests. We welcome them. We always extend the show into the selling experience. And this is something actually we became a part of and was privileged to do on Epcot that Disney had not done very seriously, because when they did the Disneyland retail, that was an afterthought. And it wasn't until we really did Epcot that retail and the guest customer became important. So I do think their needs, their feeling, and putting that first in your design, thinking like a child sometime, thinking like the grandmother that you're trying to serve, the baby boomer, is critical. And I think we did that pretty effectively for the first time in some shops in Disney. What next?
Ken, I have a question for you. It's Scott Swabe. In my lifetime, I've heard that the Food and Wine Festival at Epcot is one of the finest curated events in the world. Have you ever attended?
I did. In fact, the pictures you see behind us were made during that 2 years ago. And it's a fun thing. If you ever have a chance to go, it's a stroll through primarily World Showcase, tasting the best food of the world prepared by chefs from France and Germany and UK, and drinking in a pub and tasting wine and liqueurs from the various countries that we have there, and the sake from Japan. After you're doing that for 6 to 8 hours, you may hope you've got a hotel close by, because it's a fun thing to do. I would say go do it, Scott.
I'm going to go do it. And next time I see you, I'm going to bring the pictures that I just found of visiting Disneyland in 1974 when our grandparents took us. We went to Hawaii and then we went there. And I have pictures of all the characters, but one with Tigger, because I love Tigger. So I didn't know you were giving me a hug at 8 years old.
Well, it's possible.
It could have been you. It looks like you.
Well, hugging your kids, but you know what, Scott? One of the hazards of being a bouncy Tigger was every time I turned around to sign an autograph, my tail would just about knock a kid over. So I hope I didn't knock you over.
No, you were giving me a good hug. So when I see you in person, and I look forward to that, I'm going to bring the pictures to you from that adventure in 1974. It was so magical.
I look forward to seeing them. I'm glad you were able to hook up with Tigger. It was special for sure.
Well, that food and wine thing at Epcot sounds amazing, and we should probably have an RDI Retail Design Institute field trip, since that's in our.
I've had so many people, tell me over the years, they're like, Scott, you have to go to this event. It's one of the finest curated food and wine festivals in the world, and it's not cheap.
No, but it is really fun. They have all the restaurants with special food and beverage set up, but they set up kiosks all over the park around the lagoon. So there must be several hundred different places you can just, like I say, it's taking a dining stroll around the lagoon, which is about a mile-long walk. So you You can stop and eat in Germany and drink in France and have desserts in maybe Mexico, and go and taste some sake in Japan.
Love
Fun
that.
thing to do. Let's do that. We used to do field trips with RDI. So
I'm
we
serious. Set it
we
up, team.
we went up to South Carolina for a field trip one time,
That's
and
right.
we went
did
to Savannah. So
Savannah.
we
Yep.
can do this.
Yeah, we had
Mhm. Well, I have a question.
Yes.
Ken, you shared so many wonderful lessons. My question to you is, what is the best advice that you've ever been given in your career?
Oh gosh, keep it simple. When in doubt, leave it out. Keep on keeping it on. I guess just good design is in the detail and the doing, and you don't have to wait for that magic moment. Just start. Just go talk to somebody. Go look at something. Sketch. I would say the biggest lesson I've learned is never forget how to communicate with your quick sketch. If you don't sketch, at least develop a style where you can tell the story, because the clients don't really know what they want. You have to show them. And the sketch and the watercolor often will do that in a meeting where you don't have a computer. Now, I know computers can do it all, and I do that for a lot of design today, but it's nothing like being able to doodle on a napkin and say, do you mean something like this? And they'll start showing you what they meant that couldn't be brought out before. So
there's a kind of magic with that too.
it is. You've probably done it yourself.
And I think that especially with clients that are not necessarily creative people, but once they see that kind of magic happen, they're kind of, you have their attention, and you have their faith. They have faith in you that you can do something.
And the beauty of watercolor, honestly, and a loose sketch, it's often what you leave out that the client will then tell you what they see, and will give you a direction that you didn't even know to take. So keep it loose when you're going in, I think, is a good idea, and would suggest doing so, and be willing to go in and tell your story when you make your presentation.
Thank you.
What else? I know there's other interesting people out there I'd like to talk to.
Well, I have another question.
Okay.
I know in theme parks and in retail, line management is pretty key. And I know Disney has a lot of tricks for how they keep people engaged while they're just standing around. I was wondering if you could share any of that with us.
Well, part of it is that whole merging of pre-show, show, post-show, retail, and food, and trying to make it as seamless as possible. And keep in mind, at Disney and many, really in retail in general, that's the tangible item that you take away when you go to an experience at a park. So your pictures and your souvenirs are what you take with you. So often at Disney, we would put kiosks close to the queue line so people would see things. They would send their friend or their wife or husband, hey, go buy that shirt while we're waiting, or or they would see a food kiosk, go buy us some ice cream, or go buy us some candy. So it's that interactive opportunity, point of sale while you're waiting, and also putting show, which they've done a lot as far as video and interactive games that pass the time, because the queues, especially with social distancing and COVID, are long. So trying to keep people involved and not thinking about it is critical. So getting them involved in that story and show in pre-show. So if you notice, that's the way it always works. You got to go through the queue, you got to go to the pre-show, the post-show, and the retail is often the post-show. So all has to work together.
And then I know that you've talked a lot about how networking has really kind of fueled all these changes through your life. What are your best networking tips, and what has been sort of your best networking channel, I guess?
I think,
Like RDI, or
well,
is
I
it
think
college reunions?
making a time investment is critical. You have to, I think one of the first things I learned is being there is the first step for success. And if you're not in the meeting, if you're not talking to somebody, guess what? Somebody else is. So take the time to talk to people that you haven't talked to lately. You never know where your next project will come from just by having lunch or having a coffee or calling up somebody or dropping them a thank you note, taking time to write a note to somebody, to use the old tricks of drawing and writing and telling a little story or sharing something that's on your mind, a memory that Paul and I shared doing a painful project that might open the door to do another project together.
Hopefully one that was less painful.
Less painful. Some of that no pain, no gain definitely came through on a couple of them. But yes, you just have to take the effort and make the point. Don't wait until you need the next gig or the next job or the next client to go and talk to somebody. Talk to them while you're still busy, and maybe they need somebody to support them and looking for a transition.
Yeah, I think I learned a lot from you for that in that regard, because you are the consummate follow-up person. You know, and I think it works. It works magic. It really does. It gets people thinking, and they think, well, you know, come to think of it, I do have a project coming up.
And don't be afraid to ask that guy or gal. I know you don't have anything going on, but do you have a friend that I might talk to about a hospitality project that I was thinking about, or about a refitting for COVID that now is a new challenge? We're going to have a lot of empty stores and a lot of real estate that's got to be reimagined. And I think all of you are in a better position to do it than most people. So take the lessons you've learned and the network we have. We have an international community. And I know Lindsay and I think Catherine, you see that, but the rest of you sometimes don't realize there are people all over the world you can network with if you just take the time to drop them a note or get in touch with them.
Yep.
Well, reach out.
In your career, were you ever, I'm sure you were, but I was able to go to the Disney Institute when I worked at Best Buy. We did our Achievers sales conference there, I think in 2003.
Yes.
Were you ever involved with the Institute?
Not directly. I'm certainly familiar with it, and I know the way they created it was to educate and foster their expertise in hospitality and food and beverage, retail, training, story, theming, all of that. But it came out of actually a concept we did with a conference center, and many of the facilities there at the tree houses that we did in the early hospitality design became part of the Institute and is now next to the Disney downtown, where we did a lot of the early shopping village things. But that was
such a memorable experience. I have a question for you. Do you know the #1 asked question in Disney World that what are they called? Cast members are specifically trained on? What is the #1 question that's asked in Disney World?
My guess is, where's the restroom? But
no, it is where does the 3 o'clock parade start?
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, and then they have to ask you, well, you don't necessarily need to be in the place that it starts at 3 o'clock. Where are you planning in your schedule to be? Because it runs from 3 to 3:30. So we can explain to you about where you could be and you could intercept. And one other thing I want to share with you, and I actually had to go to see this happen on Main Street, and I don't know if it's changed, but as you go down Main Street on the left-hand side, there's a concession stand that was all the way at the end. You could get hot dogs and hamburgers and nachos, and somebody goes every half an hour to measure the temperature of the Cheese Whiz there and clean up the bar. And the Cheese Whiz had to be at 83 degrees. So I learned that as part of our conference, and I had to go see it. And it was
Okay.
true. Somebody
You're
came
an
and
incredible source of knowledge, Scott. I went through what was called Disney Way 2, which is where I dressed up as Tigger, and we went through training in food and hospitality, and we got a lot of insight into that. And I learned to make a Caesar salad in hospitality, but I didn't know that little bit about the measuring the temperature of the cheese. So
yes, I mean, that's the level of detail Disney brought to, or still does to this day. It's just why it's so incredible.
Did they tell you or show you the tunnels running through the Magic Kingdom?
Yes, and I have one of my dearest friends' mother was a seamstress there, and she explained to me too in the 80s that the whole underworld is just a whole nother experience that most people would never even know about.
Well, the architectural reality of Disney World is they think of that as the underworld basement. It's really the first floor, because in Florida, you don't really have basements unless they be flooded, because the water table is about a foot below the dirt. So they built the first floor as the basement, where a lot of the support and all the lands are connected with these corridors, which are the tunnels. Then they dug Seven Seas Lagoon and brought the dirt in as backfill to create berms around the Magic Kingdom. And hence, by the time you go through the berm, you're on the second floor with the basement underneath you, connecting all the lands. So you can go down in Main Street and come up in Fantasyland or Tomorrowland or Frontierland with the tunnels going on below you, where costume and cafeterias and all the computers and all the mechanical electrical support runs and keeps the show going. So that's was really a special thing that Disneyland didn't have, and Epcot had to some degree in Future World, but not in World Showcase. So it was really a unique thing to the Magic Kingdom.
Well, your presentation was incredible. And like I said, next time I see you, I'm going to have a lot of questions for you. Your journey has been epic and so diverse.
Well,
I had no idea.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
To have had.
Do you really drive that car? Do you really drive that car? Do you really drive that car in the picture?
No, I don't. It was a friend's car that he let me do a photo shoot with, and it was gorgeous, but didn't, like I say, no, that was just a Fantasyland experience. But the people, and I'll have to say, as great as the parks and experiences were, the people along the way, like Herbie Ryman, like Ken Anderson, like John Hinch, read Dream It, Do It by Marty Scalara. That's really the memories that I'll always cherish, to work with those men and women. The gal that was a great watercolor artist that I learned some things from, that was the interior designer for Walt's apartment and the Disneyland. He had an apartment on Main Street, Disneyland, and he had a cafe called Club 33 that I dined in frequently, actually. Almost every time I went to Disneyland. It was a special invite only dining room in Norland Square, and you look down at the guests and look into the Pirates of the Caribbean while you were dining. There was a special VIP dining room. So little things in the Magic Kingdom that were, as an Imagineer, we got pretty privileged. I would drive my car into the back lot of the Main Street park, take my kids to Tom Sawyer's Island, where they thought that was their playground. And we'd stop and get a hamburger and some popcorn, and then jump in the car and go home and never see the front gate.
That's so amazing.
Yep.
All right, I know we have some other people out there, and I know you're thinking about some Magic Kingdom things. What's been your experience? What's your question?
Any last questions, anyone? Otherwise, I can read some of the comments. I don't know if you saw any of them.
No, I
No,
didn't.
we get that. Yeah.
Reginaldo, I'm sorry if I'm butchering the name. Reginaldo Reyes said, Ken Fuller, was great to see you. I was super excited to see themselves in one of your photos.
Oh, Reginald, indeed.
Janet
Okay.
Graber said thank you to both of you. That was a fantastic job.
Who is that again?
Janet Graber.
Oh,
Yeah.
Janet. Yes, thank
Mhm.
you. Okay.
Some people are trickling off. I don't know if Justin is still on, but he said, thank you for sharing what an amazing portfolio of work. 9 lives well lived.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
very nice.
A pleasure.
Ian said, great stuff, Ken. Good job.
Hey, always a pleasure, Ian, from the great Scotsman.
And then Margot Jax had to run, but she said, thanks, guys. Great story and guidelines.
Well, we're looking forward to hear some of your
Yeah.
stories. Everyone needs to package your story. It's hard work, I'll tell you that, but it's worth going down the road and start to document. Take the time to make pictures of yourself and your friends in your office, because you wish you would have them when you start to tell your story.
As always, great advice. I think the questions have died down and people are trickling off. So I'm so happy we were able to do this. And I just want to end it on your point of taking pictures and documenting your story, because this was a really lovely and engaging evening. And I'm so thrilled I could be a part of it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity to share. Keep dreaming and doing.
Awesome. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Lindsay. Great job.
Great
Appreciate
job.
it.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye-bye.